I don't know actually. I think that I do have a meeting room booked, but I don't know which one it is. Let me see. I could have mistaken where I'm meant to be going. Hello. Let me have a look. Mindful.
Must be that one because this one's full.
CBGB. I don't know what that is. CBGB.
You can use there as well.
Okay, thanks. Is there a meeting room CBGB?
If there is, I don't know.
All right, no worries. I'll keep looking. Oh, right, okay. Oh, hi. Sorry, I couldn't find
Don't worry,
CBGB.
Because people team are both sides.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at this. Oh my God, which one is it? Thank you.
I'm just going to turn this off. Sorry, I haven't been around. My husband's away in Japan at the moment, so I've had to, for rugby reasons.
Oh, right. Oh, cool. Okay.
So I have to kind of do the school run, get home, take the dog out, stay around for a while, let the dog out again, then come to work. So I've got 2 weeks of juggling kids and
okay,
dog.
No.
So that's why I wasn't around this morning. So I worked from home this morning, then just come in for meetings. So today is the long-awaited day for you. Sorry the process has taken so long, but I like to be thorough about things, and I did have quite a few conversations, both with Chris, with Johanna, but also several conversations with Jean and some guidance from Hayley as well in all of this. And I wanted to make sure that I'd been as thorough as I could.
Yeah.
And so, but I appreciate that it's been difficult for you in that time to try and wait for a result. So I do have the letter for you.
Okay.
So I could either hand deliver it or I can email a soft copy to you as well, and that's absolutely fine as a PDF. Probably the best thing to do is just to read it out.
Okay.
Then I don't miss anything in terms of my communication.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So essentially, today the purpose of the meeting is the outcome of the grievance that you raised. There were specifically 2 areas that I picked up on. The first one was regarding salary increases that you raised when we spoke, and how you haven't received anything more than just the kind of annual 2%. And the second bigger point was more around unequal pay on the grounds of gender. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to address those 2 issues today. If there's anything outstanding, I can make notes, and if there's still anything, then you have the opportunity to come back.
The salary increase wasn't really a point.
Okay, well, I looked into it.
All right, okay.
I think it was because we discussed it in the original meeting that we had. We discussed that, and you raised that as a question, so I've addressed that question. But don't worry.
All right, okay.
it's that I've got the data. So, as I say, you've chosen not to be accompanied by anybody for the meeting today. As I said, I did have quite a long conversations both with Chris and Johanna, and the People Propositions team were really supportive in giving me all of the information that I needed, and also spoke to Jean several times on this as well, because there were some things that Chris and Johanna weren't in a position to answer because things happened before they were enrolled. Mm-hmm. So there was a bit of background and digging around to do around that. Just so you know, I did get a full data set from the People Propositions team, and I have reviewed all of the salary data across LCRA Grade B legal counsel and senior legal counsel roles. I don't know the who's and the whys and the whats. I just know it all anonymised. So that there's no GDPR conflict of interest in me being able to see any of that information. And therefore I've been able to use the salary data, understand some of the history around job evaluation and job of equal value, and therefore take all of that into consideration when addressing the questions. So as I say, I'm really sorry it's taken me so long, but I just wanted to be super thorough on everything. But now my investigation is fully complete. Regarding the issues you raised, I'm going to go through each of them in turn. So we'll start off with the first one, which isn't really an issue, which is around the salary increases. So according to the People Team records, you joined in 2009.
Okay, I joined in July 2008.
Yeah, so we have a salary increase down for it just as 2009, so it could have been in February.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
in terms of your first salary increase up to 2019. So in those records, there has been a mix of different salary changes since that time. You had the biggest, it's all in the letter, the biggest salary increase you had was in 2017, which was 7% increase in pay. You also had a 5.5% pay rise in 2013. And then in 2015, you had the annual 2% followed by a further 3.23% in July of that year as well. So according to the evidence that I've obtained, you have had pay rises of more than 2% per year, which was the average across those times. And I also cross-referenced when you did receive 7% in 2017, whether everybody else did, and they didn't. So some people got 0 and some people got 2 in that time period. So there was evidence to suggest an incremental increase on the core 3 average at that point in time. Okay? And I've got all the numbers.
All right, okay, cool.
So you can have a copy of the So in terms of the comment that you made, which we followed up on, I can't find any evidence that your salary's only gone up by the annual. In fact, actually one year got 0. So it just goes to show, perhaps everybody did. But there's a good spread, and there's obviously evidence of you having a pay rise in the middle of a salary cycle as well. The second area was around unequal pay. So the key factor in all of this is determining what jobs in 3 are considered jobs of equal value. So I did some research on this in terms of what that means, and I decided, based on all the information that I had, that jobs of equal value to yours were all grade B, legal counsel or senior legal counsel roles within the LCRA team at 3. And I determined that those would be the best benchmark to determine a job of equal value. Okay? I didn't look at grade C legal counsel, because there are some grade C legal counsels as well, and I excluded them from the analysis because your job has been banded as a grade B. That happened in a 2016 job evaluation process. Well, the LCRA team had a job evaluation, and that was when that happened, based on everyone's memory. And therefore, that has been the reference point. So a grade B legal counsel or senior legal counsel role is the point of reference for your salary versus everybody else. So when looking at all of the data specific to grade B legal counsel and senior legal counsel roles, all salaries fell within the salary banding for a grade B. So as you know, every job here has a salary band of a minimum and a maximum, and every single person employed as a grade B legal counsel or senior legal counsel's salaries fell within the salary banding for a grade B. The biggest salary range was amongst women across the team, and there was a smaller difference between men within the team. So when we do salary banding at 3, and the recommended sort of methodology is to look at people's compa ratio. So compa ratio is how much you earn compared to the midpoint for that range. So if you have a salary range from A to B, the midpoint is called 100, and then we index people's salary versus that midpoint for the range of salaries within that band for that job and that grade. So looking at that information, the female compa ratios were between 83 and 113, and the male compa ratios were between 92 and 111. I also found that the majority of grade B legal counsel or senior legal counsel employees earning below 100 was 64%. So 2/3 of all grade B legal counsel or senior legal counsel employees earned below the midpoint for the salary range. So they have a compa ratio of less than 100 for the majority. Of those above 100, 4 out of 5 were women and 1 was man. So there were 5 people above that level. Again, 4 out of 5, because 75% sounds like a silly percentage. 4 out of 5 of them were women. Okay. So my investigation then asked the question to some of the team about how people's starting salary influence what they're on now, because it felt to me that the biggest driver of someone's salary is their starting salary when they joined the business.
I would agree.
Salaries of employees are set at the point of joining. They're set at market rates, and the skills of the person and that individual and their experience, and also the prospective type of law that they specialise in, that individual's pay expectations when joining the business, and the market conditions at the time. So an investigation of the data, there is little consistency in the starting salary of LCRA legal counsels and senior legal counsels. However, they all sit within the banding of a grade B legal counsel or senior legal counsel, and the majority of them are earning below the average, below the midpoint for that salary band. So in terms of the gender piece, I can't find any evidence that anything specific about your salary is indicative of being a gender-related grievance on the grounds of equal pay. And I come to that conclusion because the majority of high earners within your job band are women, and that the majority of, and it's not that your salary is miles away from everybody else, the majority of people are earning below the midpoint for the salary band of a grade B legal counsel and senior legal counsel person. So I can't uphold, based on the data, the grievance point that you've raised. Okay. The third area that you talked about was was about being a part-time worker and whether that had impacted other jobs that you could apply for, and that came up in our interview. And from that perspective, the view from the business is that vacancies are all advertised internally, and anyone can express an interest in applying for any of them. Find out more from your recruiting manager, skills and experiences, and we do have a flexible working policy in place. So in terms of how the business views people who are part-time and their ability to apply for other roles, we can't see any constraints on that for somebody who is a part-time employee from being able to apply for any role that might be of interest to them or fits with their work-life balance. Okay, so in terms of summarising, I can't find any evidence of gender discrimination in terms of equal pay. And therefore I can't uphold the grievance on that basis. But with terms of developing forward, the recommendation is discuss this with your career development and aspirations with your line manager. If you want to do something different, then find out more information about the role, go and talk to people about it if there is something that comes up that's of interest to you. So that's the news. Yeah. I've been totally objective in all of this and used the stats and the facts in order to come to that conclusion.
Okay.
If you do have the right to appeal the decision, which is entirely up to you, and you should do it in writing with your reasons to the People Assist team, and the details are on here, by the 15th of October, so you have 7 working days if you want to appeal that decision. But again, if you've got any other problems, questions or queries, then by all means answer me. The only thing I can't do is disclose individuals' salaries to you, because that breaches their GDPR and confidentiality. So I know you've referenced a particular person and I can't reference them back, because from an equal pay perspective, you're comparing yourself to everybody who it does a job of equal value to you. So you're comparing yourself to all grade B legal counsel and senior legal counsel roles.
I must say, and I've looked at the legislation, which I have here, the PLC overview of effectively what the criteria and what the key test is when assessing and considering the equal pay question. And it feels to me that and I completely appreciate, and I just want to say thank you very much for all of the work that you've done in this. I do genuinely appreciate it, and it's nice to know that I've been heard and you've gone away and you've done all of this work, so I really appreciate it. I think for me, of what I'm picking up, and like you, I'm equally feeling my way through this. This is not something I've ever done before or raised before, but I would say that the one caveat that I'm not entirely clear with the manner in which you've undertaken
Yeah.
the investigation is it's to do with actually it's equal pay to a male comparator, whereas I think that you've looked at it as equal pay based on a benchmarking of the grading, but that actually is a different question, because the question I asked was, am I being paid the same as my male counterpart? Because to a certain degree there's always a bit of a danger that there's a bit of corporate sort of whitewashing by playing this whole, well, in this grade and in this banding, you're in the banding, because I've heard that before.
Yeah.
And this is, and you know, actually I heard the whole commentary about the banding. It has been played back to me before, but actually on this particular question, I already knew that was in the banding. The question was, is the banding not a bit of a corporate smokescreen to hide the fact that there are certain males who are genuinely being paid a lot more than I am?
But there are a lot of women who are being paid a lot more than
But
you
that
as
doesn't,
well.
yes, but that doesn't matter. Because the legislation is am I being paid for work of equal value as my male counterparts? And I suspect on a fact-based, if you looked at the male comparator that I feel has the most sort of equivalence in terms of value of work, being a grade B and a specific legal counsel title role, that is it's almost like a black and white fact-based. Are they being paid the same? If they're not, is there a reason why they are not? And if I'm not, then statutorily that is actually contrary to the laws that the government is looking to bring into place to try and regulate and force companies not to create the smokescreen around different layers of payment schemes. So I would probably I will look further into it, and I probably would challenge the basis of the review being that it's been anonymously looking at the overall kind of like salary weightings, as opposed to the specific question of, am I being paid the same as my male counterpart? That's a slightly different question.
And that was a specific individual, not...
Yes, James Sandham.
That specific individual, because you believe that your role is identical.
Correct.
To
in
his.
Value, in work of similar value, and at similar grades and with similar job titles.
So I was looking a broader set of what equal value meant when people compare someone in a retail, and someone in a warehouse. So those can also be considered, relevant comparators in terms of equal value. I'm not qualified to determine the nuance between what you're expressing as how far in law it sits in terms of equal value. I've read the guidance that you get on the government website about the 3 different types of equal pay, and there are 3. It's equal value, and there's 2 others.
Material factor, defence.
Yes, and I felt equal value was the one that of the 3 that applied the most to this situation. But I then applied that across to if a job has been banded, all of those jobs are of equal value. According to the way the organisation has structured it. So that's a moot point which I need to write all this down now.
Okay, yes. The test is more to do with, are companies treating males and females equally, as opposed to, are companies paying the same jobs of equal value in a range? Because why would you bother with putting in place legislation? Obviously companies within a certain banding will pay people a different range of numbers. The point around equal pay was to make sure that if companies are paying males who are doing work of equal value, women should have parity and should not be, for underlying family and other reasons, end up with what at the short end of the stick. So that would be my one sort of caveat.
Okay.
The other question I had was, did you actually seek external legal advice, or have you been to an external law firm to get a bit of a sort of guidance on how you went about your...
No, I use my initiative to look up, within the bounds of this, as this is a grievance hearing at the moment. It's an internal process, not an external process.
Cool.
So I sought advice on how I should approach it, and I took them through what my plans were, and no one flagged that I'd done the wrong thing. So, but that's not the issue. I think I need to write this down and capture it in a way that expresses what you've said, so that I can feed that back. So just give us a minute while I write this down.
Do you appreciate the test that I'm flagging being a slightly different test to the test of looking at? Okay, thank you. But do you appreciate the point I'm making around the test not being looking at the overall banding, but rather looking specifically at my male counterparts? Am I being treated differently being a female? Because that's basically the whole point of the Equal Pay Act 1970, was to clamp down for basically companies who are openly giving different rates to men and women who are otherwise performing the same job, but effectively via subvert discrimination, there being basically a gender pay gap. So the fact that there are women who, have negotiated and got themselves into a better position, and you're absolutely right. Undoubtedly, there are a number who are being paid more, but that is not the test. The test is on this individual, single, independent basis, am I being paid less than my immediate male counterpart?
How much less would you determine to be significant or not significant, or was your expectation parity?
Well, equal pay, that's what the legislation says. It should be equal pay. Men and women who do the same work of equal value should be paid the same. There's no reason that a company should be able to defend itself with paying one less than the other.
Okay.
And I mean, did you actually find out in particular in relation to the male colleagues that I listed what their salaries were?
No.
Okay.
I have male/female, I know gender.
Yeah.
And I know when they joined, I know their line manager, but I don't have anything individually named as part of this process.
Okay, because I think in fairness, as part of, because the test is actually very specific in the differential between what am I being paid versus my male counterparts, I do believe you do actually need to know the males that I listed, am I actually on a very basic flat test, am I being paid less than them?
So is it male counterparts or just one person?
Well,
because we need to be clear whether you feel that equal value is judged versus all men who are grade B legal counsel, senior legal counsel roles, or just one individual.
Well, I mean,
so where do you see that?
I mean,
sitting?
Personally, I think that, and I'm kind of, I would like to know, and I would like to understand if I'm being paid the same as James. You are right. I haven't quite resolved in my mind whether that the net should be cast wider beyond that single individual. In my mind, I see James as being very equivalent in our bespoke subject matter expert sort of nature, but actually, if you look at other, I haven't quite got an answer to that one, to be perfectly honest. I still need to work out what that means. But my immediate thought was that James was somebody who I thought I'd like to understand if there's an Equal Pay Act issue there.
Okay.
So have a look at what it says on the test. So that's the critical bit under the Equal Pay Act, which is on the comparator.
Yep.
And it talks of not a wider class of people who do the same job, but rather more specifically at a male counterpart. And effectively, and I'm the female being entitled to specifically call out the male comparator and wanting to have an understanding whether within the sort of parameters of the legislation that is being appropriately dealt with, or if in fact there may be an issue. And I think that's the test.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to make a note.
You can have that.
Oh, thank you.
It's from PLC.
Practical law. Okay, so it's referencing the comparator. Who is a comparator?
And the comparator that I'd chosen from the outset was James.
Sandon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On a flat test, if he's being paid more than me, then the company has to have either an appropriate justification as to why that is, or alternatively, there is an equal pay issue there that needs to be resolved.
The comparator does not have to give consent. Women can name no more than one comparator. Comparator does not have to be representative of employees doing that particular type of work.
So he doesn't do specifically what I do, but he's like myself. He's a single subject matter expert. He does litigation. I look after all real estate.
Nor does it matter if the employer can point to a different man doing the same work as the claimant for the same pay. Okay. And I've got a case here. It could be at the same time, could be predecessors, and so on. Those are the two things that I found. The job evaluation schemes is what we did.
And on the job evaluation scheme, did you actually find that my job was valued at the same as James's?
My understanding, because there was nobody present in the legal team who was there, because the person who was responsible for that moved to group.
Yeah. Kate.
So neither person that I interviewed had any recollection of the scheme. So you have to come to the conclusion as your job was a grade B job title legal counsel. Therefore, had that been different, then your job would have changed at that point.
Yeah. And
either would have been a grade C legal counsel or something different, because I understand there are some grade C legal counsels as well. But that's a job title, not a job.
Yeah, it is. It's a title, but and to that extent, I must say that's where I kind of feel that James and I are quite a distinguished group, insofar as we are the exception of not having the so-called senior at the front of our title naming, albeit we are still considered in a more sort of senior grouping on salary. Presumably, it's got to be something. So the value of what we do is valuable enough that we still, notwithstanding the title being unchanged or non-differentiated from our C's, we are in the grade B category.
Yeah. And each team has different bands. So LCRAs are different to marketing, which are different to tech and ops as well.
Oh, really?
By the way.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the salary benchmarking and the max and minimums are set in the context of the specialist area that you work in. Just so you know, marketing people get paid an awful lot less than everyone else. You don't have any professional qualifications, probably. No, I don't know that. I don't know. I know what they are for lower bands that for teams that I manage. I don't know what they are for LCRA, but in some instances they are set differently, and also because we work in technology, the average salaries of people working in technology are higher than people working in FMCG, for example. There's kind of a salary inflation when you work in technology. Who knew? Glad I left Coca-Cola. I'm just reading about the job evaluation schemes and things just to see what it says on here about that.
I'll just have a look at the time, make sure I'm not. Should be okay. I mean, if you like, do you want to keep this?
I will keep that. I tell you what I will do. So, in terms of next steps from this, I think you will probably need to write back within the 7 days to say that you don't believe that your specific grievance was addressed because it was referencing
banding
your individual salary versus a male comparator rather than all job B bubs, and therefore request a response back again, I guess.
Yeah.
So your appeal will be based on the fact that
for me it's more to do with the test. It's more to do with what test was applied, and you know I can see the efforts you put was very thorough. I just think that the test needs to have been a slightly different test.
So I think you need to write that in your response, in your appeal to say.
And so I just want to say, really no hard feelings, and I'm really grateful for everything you've done.
No, that's fine.
So,
That's fine. I think you need to put that in your letter.
Okay.
I probably won't do any minutes then from today, but I think in your letter you should write that you feel that the grievance wasn't specifically addressed as it was about, that the comparison was made across all grade B legal counsel, legal student councils, whereas yours was specific to a key male comparator colleague, and that wasn't addressed in terms of the salary discrepancy or otherwise between the two of you, and yours was specific on the grounds of you consider their job, yours and his jobs to be almost identical, and therefore that's the equal pay grievance is still there.
Okay.
I think is that summarising pretty much what you said?
That's basically.
And then I think what I will do is I will speak to Hayley and tell her what's happened in the meeting today, but also make my own set of recommendations in terms of how that is heard going forward, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
So do you mean as in that maybe you will pass it on to somebody else, or I don't?
I believe I will make a recommendation of what I think should happen, and it feels as though I don't have the depth of legal knowledge in this particular case in order to address your concerns.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yep. You don't want to come up against a lawyer.
No. But you know.
I'm joking.
I think you're absolutely. You're well within your rights to do all of these things.
Yes,
and it's
no
important
harm. That companies are aware of these issues. I think, to be honest with you, that's kind of part of it. It isn't per se a grievance. I just want to have comfort on the question and feel that I'm being treated fairly.
Okay, that's fine. So I will, if you can write back your thing in 7 days, it's on the letter where you need to send it to. I will debrief Hayley, and therefore, obviously, then because that's an appeal on the decision, then you need to write that you don't agree with it. The right question was asked, I think, or the right comparison was done, and therefore request that it be reviewed.
Okay.
And then we'll try and get back to you, or someone will get back to you within a shorter time frame than this is taken.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Oh no, that's okay. Thank you.
Cool.
You're done for the day. I am. I returned.